Imagine two votes, one in Paris holding 120 billion euros in African wealth, another in West Africa where governments can't access enough funds to build hospitals. Today, we are going to unlock both. But before we do, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why some of the richest countries in natural resources are some of the poorest in development? Stay with me because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you a system so clever it's been hiding in plain sight for 70 years. Now, here is what is fascinating. 11 of the world's poorest nations share one thing: a currency system that was meant to make them prosper. But what if I told you this system actually ensures to make them stay poor? In a moment, I will show you how exactly this works. But first, let's try a quick experiment. Pull out your phone, look at any product made in China. When China sells this to an African country using the CFA franc, something extraordinary happens. But before I reveal that, we need to understand something. In 1945, while the world celebrated the end of World War II, another system of control was being put in place. France created a currency called Franc des colonies françaises d'Afrique, literally meaning the franc of the French colonies of Africa. Now think about that name for a moment. A currency literally announcing colonial control in 1945. But here is where it gets interesting. When African nations began protesting this obvious colonial name, France made a brilliant move. They simply changed the name to Communauté Française Africaine, keeping the same CFA initials, same system, different levels. So ask yourself, if only the name changed, what else stayed the same? Now let me show you something that will change the way you see international trade forever. When China buys oil from Chad for $100 million, the money doesn't go directly to Chad. Instead, it goes through a complex system that ends with 50% of those foreign reserves sitting in the French treasury, not in Chad, not in an African bank, in Paris. But wait, isn't this Chad's money? Their oil, their resources? Now, supporters of this system, including the French Minister of Finance, make some important points. They argue that the CFA provides stability, pointing to low inflation rates. Yes, the CFA has low inflation rates if you compare it to Nigeria's Naira and the Ghanaian cedi. That's true. And they are not entirely wrong about the stability. But here is the question nobody seems to ask. What is the true cost of this stability? Now, let's look at something shocking. Among the 10 top African economies, only one CFA country makes the list. Ivory Coast at number 9, and they are only there because they are the largest cocoa producers in the world. But here is the twist that should make every African pause. When Ivory Coast sells cocoa internationally, guess where the foreign currency goes to first? It goes into the vault in Paris we talked about earlier, the same vault holding over 120 billion euros of African wealth. Now, think about what this means for you. When a country needs to build schools, hospitals, or roads, they often have to borrow money, and sometimes the same money they earned from their resources. Now, this is a system that is meant to make these countries look like they are always begging. Meanwhile, they have oil, they have resources. Let's put this to be practical. It's like having your salary sent to somebody's account and then having to borrow it back with interest. France created 2 central banks in Africa that takes care of the CFA francs. You have the Central Bank of West African countries and the Central Bank of Central African countries. Now, in these 2 central banks, France has a representative in both central banks, and these representatives have veto power, meaning they have the right to cancel any decision that is not in France's favor. Much that the 50% of any international transaction that is carried out from any of these countries is kept in an account in France called the operation account. That account is controlled by France totally, and France gives no feedback to any of these African countries about these accounts. France can use these accounts to carry out investments. They can use these accounts to borrow money to African countries who pay upon interest. They can use this money to carry out their investments in their own country. They can use this money to do whatever they want to do. Now, there is talk of a new currency called the echo. But then we need to watch out for red flags. If the guarantor of the echo remains France, that's a red flag. If the operation account is still in France, it is a red flag. If the same board structure remains with French veto power, red flag. If foreign reserves still need to be deposited in Paris, red flag. Now, supporters of the Franc CFA system say, look at what happens to Guinea and Mali when they tried to leave the Franc CFA. At one time, Guinea tried to leave the Franc CFA and its economy was really shattered. But here's what they don't tell you. Those countries were isolated and pressured. Today, we have something they didn't have back then: unity and awareness. And back then, when Guinea tried to make its own currency, France flooded Guinea with counterfeit money, making the Guinean money drop seriously in value. So the awareness and unity of today is going to change all that. In the next 5 years, we are at crossroads. The echo currency could either be our path to true independence or just another CFA with a different name. Does that remind you of something France did some decades ago when it kept the initials of the CFA, maintained the system and changed the label from Franc des Colonies Français d'Afrique to Communauté Financière Africaine? But here is what changes everything. The system's biggest weakness is also its best kept secret. It relies on our silence. Every time someone learns about this system, every time we share this information, the pressure for change grows. In fact, since 2020, we have seen unprecedented challenges to this system. Why? Because people started asking questions. Here are 3 specific things you can do right now. Follow the eco currency developments. Watch for the specific red flags we discussed earlier. If you see them, sound an alarm. Next, support regional integration. The more we trade within Africa, the less power external systems have over us. Next, share this knowledge. The single most powerful thing you can do is to educate others. Remember, this system has stayed for 70 years because many don't understand how it works. Now imagine 2 possible African futures. One where we continue allowing external powers to control our resources, or one where we build our own economic growth, control our own resources, and determine our own future. Now remember those 2 votes we talked about at the beginning. The key to unlocking both votes is not in Paris. It's not even in a bank. It's in our unity, our understanding, our action. Join our community and hit the like button so that this video goes to more people to create more awareness so that we can together open these votes. Now share this video with 3 people who need to understand this system. Comment below with your country and let us know what your nation will build first if it had full control of its resources. And here is something to think about until our next investigation. Have you ever wondered why African presidents who tried to change this system, the system we have just talked about in this video, suddenly lost power? Have you ever tried to think about that? Well, drop your comments below. That's a story for another day. This is the Strategic Lens, helping you to see beyond the headlights. Remember, knowledge isn't just power, it's freedom. See you in my next video. Bye.